yeah?
Not really, but I was a fan of the Dodgers. We had Ron Say and Steve, what was his name? Manny Mota, had Steve Garvey.
Steve Harvey. Steve.
Yeah. Those were all Dodgers.
Yeah, the Dodgers. Won. So we would play the Dodgers or something. Yeah.
So it'll be another
Against next Friday.
it'll be a Toronto LA game if Toronto wins tonight.
Wait tonight.
Wouldn't that be
One
fun?
more game tonight.
So who are you hoping for?
Well, I'll let you know if the Jays win. Until then, I'm a Jays fan all the way. Because again, I have no connection to Seattle.
How about the Dodgers? Oh, Steve Harvey.
Not committing until they're there.
40.
Okay, good morning. Good morning. So we were talking about the prohibition of ona'ah, of overcharging, and we haven't even really defined it yet, because the prohibition of ona'ah is overcharging a person even by 1 penny. It's only actionable after the fact if there was a certain amount of overcharge, right? It has to be 1/6 more than fair market value. But lechatchila, if you know that a person can that you're overcharging the person and he's not aware of it and you're taking advantage, then it's prohibited even if you're charging him less than the 1/6. Now let's go on to this next issue. Lokeach shenoda lo shehit aneh b'mechirat hachefetz biyoter mishtut. So let's say a buyer discovers that he was ripped off in the purchase of a piece of merchandise. V'nishtamesh b'chefetz kodem shehodia l'mocher. And he ended up using the object before trying to get a hold of the seller to demand his refund. So nechshav hadavar kemechila ve'enu yachol litvoa ha'ona. Once you use the item, then you can't now later say, I want my money back. In other words, once you discover you were ripped off, you at that point have one of two options. You can either decide to grumble and accept it, the fact that you overpaid, and then just use the item and, forget about it. Or you can make an issue out of it, but you can't do both. You can't start using the item and then afterwards demand a refund. Ela imkain hodia l'mocher va'achar kach ishtamish b'chefetz ve'in kan mechilas ona v'hamekach batal. The only exception would be is if you notified the seller that you want to nullify the sale because you're unhappy with the amount that you paid, and then you use the object afterwards. So therefore, you're letting him know that you're not moichel, that you're not forgiving the overcharge, and that you want to nullify the sale. But then v'yesh lo l'shalem l'mocher ma shenishtamesh u'ma shehifsid b'hishtamshuto. But then you would have to pay the seller either a rental fee for your use of the item or a depreciation fee, if your use depreciated the item. V'chol ze nachon k'shenoda l'lokeach shahona biyoter mishtut. Aval ad shtut eino mechila shaharei hamekach kaim uveshalohu mishtamish v'yochol litvoa ha'ona. But that's only when you discover that the amount of overcharge was more than 1/6. But if it's less than 1/6, your use of the item is not a mechila, because you could say to him, well, it's not actionable, I can't nullify the sale. But what you are allowed to do is to demand from him that he give you a refund on the amount that he overcharged you. And so you're allowed to use the item, but you're also allowed to tell him, I expect you to give me back the added amount that you charged me. Now, this is not a very common situation, because as we learned when we learned Hilchos Onah, there are always added amounts based on the sale experience. The guy could say, listen, the reason why I charged you this amount is because, you came to my Forest Hill showroom, to buy the merchandise. And so, that's the reason why there's more overhead. And so it's very difficult to make this argument, especially if it's less than 1/6. Oh, we got a lot of guys on the on the line today, the Zoom today. Okay. Okay, now when the overcharge is more than 1/6, kol shaha'ona yotera al shtus, afilu pruta echas hamekach batel v'hamis'ana. So, by the way, the halacha is as follows: if and by the way, he's unfortunately, there have been times in the Sefer when I've caught him misciting the halacha. This is an example of where he hasn't really been careful in his language. And I think that if I had to do it over again, I probably would not have chosen the Sefer, but we're so heavily invested in it already. We're going to see it through, even though there are a number of errors in the book. What he said over here in this paragraph is a little bit misleading. The laws of Ona'ah are as follows. When you get ripped off, if the amount of rip-off is less than 1/6, then there's nothing you can do legally. You can tell the guy what you did was wrong, and you can tell him off, and you say you're not happy, but there's no actionable offense. You don't have a right to take him to Beis Din.
Has he acted appropriately from first?
He's violated the Torah, even if he charges you a pruta, a penny more.
You can
Then
tell him that as well if he's a frum Jew.
If he's a frum Jew, you can tell him. Now, as I said, in today's marketplace, it's very hard to make that argument because there's always a bit of a margin, unless you're dealing with a commodity that is so fixed, and he completely misrepresented the fixed, like there's an index on a commodity, which is not, which industries would there be like an index on a commodity? Where you're only allowed, let's say if it's gasoline, I guess maybe that would be one thing. Even though like in the US, there is no such thing. It's only heavily regulated. It's so heavily regulated here in Canada.
This is the basic problem with egg and milk. They have that control. Right?
There are controlled prices, but you can still see that there's different prices at different stores.
Wholesale level that it's fixed, but retail levels.
But even in wholesale, there's
Well, it's set. Yeah. Unless you're trying to have a chicken farm, egg farm, then it was set. Yeah.
set by the government. Okay.
Big market.
I suppose over a long period of time, a person, could lose potentially a lot of money. But if the overcharge is less than 1/6, then there's no legal recourse. If it's exactly 1/6, then the sale is still valid, but the seller has to return the amount that he overcharged. And if it's over 1/6, the buyer has a right to nullify the sale.
But it's an overcharge based on what, market value? Or?
That's the
Right, so there has to be an index. It has to be such a fixed market
Right.
that you can clearly identify. That's why when we learned these halachas originally, we said in most retail situations, you really can't say that there's a fixed price because there's always added costs depending upon the seller's.
But it adds like an item, seats, that's got 20 different prices.
That's right.
Anywhere from,
Understood. Yeah. Okay.
Remember, the adding on the profit is only based upon what the retail market is asking. If you buy something that normally you pay $10 for, and you end up buying it for $1, you can still sell it for the regular market value, and you're making 500%. it's not about what your profit is, right? It's about what's out there in terms of the market value of an item. It's not in terms of the profit
Correct.
margin that the business.
That is,
make.
that is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
So you say you're only supposed to make X amount of profit on an item. That's irrelevant in terms of you buy a closeout deal, that's.
Right. Yeah, that you're in that business. You buy
Right.
closeouts, right? Yeah, that's typical of the closeout business, where you buy an item that they've stopped production on, and you know, you have your costs. There's also the risks, and so you're entitled to charge whatever you want to charge, right? Because there's no fair market value there. Okay, now anyway, okay, so that's that halacha. Kol shahona yetera al shtos. If the overcharge is more than a sixth, afilu pruta echas hamekach batel v'hamisana yochel lachzer achayfetz. So the sale is null and void, and the guy who was ripped off can demand a refund and return the item. Aval hama'ana oso eni yochel lachzor imratza ze v'kibel b'zehu das moran hashulchan aruch. The ripper offer, in other words, the seller who overcharged does not have the option of unilaterally nullifying the sale with the argument that I overcharged you, I want to nullify the sale. Now, why would he do that? He could do it for any number of reasons. Maybe his reputation is at stake.
You can just go back the difference.
He could give back the difference. He could, but let's say he wants that commodity because he was able to find an even bigger sucker, right? You know, and he could say, well, I overcharged you. That you're not allowed to do. That's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. The hatam b'chdei shelo yehi chotei niskar, because we don't want to reward a sinner. Shaharei im lo honeu lo hoyachol levatel hamekach. You know, because after all, if I hadn't ripped you off, then there would be no question I can't nullify the sale. So what do you want to say? Because I ripped you off, I should be able to benefit by canceling the sale? V'chol ze davka shahamisana lo tova ona aso. Aval im tova ona aso, af hama'ana yachol lachzer bo shekol zman shelo nisratza daina misana be'amekach, yachol hamisana lachzer bo afilu kishenu toveya ha'ona. He says, but that's only when the buyer has not lodged the complaint. If the buyer lodges a complaint saying, I expect you to give me a refund for the amount that you ripped me off, there the seller can say, you know what? You're right, I ripped you off. Just return the item. I'll give you a full refund. Correct. Shekeven shahamisana yachol lachzer bo lo nigmar hamekach me'olam v'lachein gam hame'ana yachol lachzer v'zehu das harama. And this is all according to the Rama, that since the buyer has a grievance and he can nullify the sale, that gives the right for the seller to nullify the sale at his discretion. And the last line is, Ela im kein hamisana nisratza o shavsak yoser mishir azman shel tviyas onashu ve'en hama'ana yachol lachzer. Unless the buyer only started the complaint too late. As we'll see, you only have a limited amount of time to complain that you were overcharged. You don't have an indefinite amount of time. As we learned previously, when we were learning the laws of Ona'ah, you have until a normal person would be able to discover that he was ripped off. In other words, if the index is published, let's say every month on fair market value, and 6 months go by, then you can't demand a refund because, like, where were you up until now? Why didn't you check the index? You should have checked. Go ahead, Paul. What did you want to say?
Rabbi, intuited I was trying to ask a question. I'm sorry for interrupting. I was just curious as to whether the seller, this law applies to a seller selling to a non-Jew as well, or is it just selling to a Jew?
So the laws of Ona'ah, as far as overcharging and being able to demand a refund, do not apply between a Jew and a non-Jew. They only apply to a fellow Jew. And the reason for that is that the attitude of the Torah is that in general, it's the market is a free enterprise market. And the only reason why the Torah demands that you, if I'm recalling correctly from memory, the only reason why the Torah demands that you not overcharge a Jew is an act of chesed to your fellow Jew. It's the
Sounds like rivers, isn't it?
it's similar to ribbis, which is in contradistinction to stealing. Stealing is always
We spoke
prohibited,
about a few days ago.
right? And so if I think I'm remembering correctly, I hope I'm not misremembering. Yeah.
I mean, the reason I asked that question is because that might be a reason why the seller just wants to nullify it so he can get a non-Jew to pay that higher price,
Could be,
right?
could be,
So-
yeah, it could be. We don't know.
But doesn't feel like stealing, overcharging, it's not like stealing, right? Because you're charging more than
So you could argue that it's a form of stealing because you're exploiting a person's ignorance and you're taking more money than you should.
Is there a concept of buyer beware, like, I know in
Yeah.
secular.
Yeah, caveat emptor, yeah.
Rabbi, you should know that in secular law, in all situations of making an election to avoid a contract, including deceptive practices, misrepresentation, duress, it's the same as the Ramah, that basically it's on the buyer has the election, the seller has no right to elect. The election has to be done right away, within certainly as soon as possible. And once you make the election, even through your conduct using the goods or whatever, it's irrevocable. You can't go back.
Okay. There you go. Okay. Thank you, Marv. Okay. Let's go. Let us continue. Isser ona'a sha'asra Torah lo nemar b'chol hadvarim kegon bekarkos avodim shtaros vehekdeshos shekol elu nismatu midin ona'a migzeras hakasav. There are certain things that are not included in the prohibition of ona'a, which means that if you overcharge for the following items, the buyer cannot claim that he was ripped off. They are real estate, servants, contracts, and hekdesh, things that were sanctified for the temple. All four of these items, really, there's only two that are practical today. Would be, well, I'm saying it's not practical today, and also slaves. You're not. There's no slave market that I know of.
South Africa.
Or Saudi Arabia.
Servants.
Slave servant, either used
No,
interchangeably.
but let's say that you have somebody working for you in your house.
Nanny?
Yeah.
That's
Saying
that's
you have
that's
to pay them.
that's an employee. That's not a servant. Yeah. And so there are I don't think that the laws of Ona apply to labor law. Like, I don't think a person could say, you didn't pay me fair market value for my work, and I
What if
demand.
they didn't get paid minimum wage?
That's different. You have to abide by Dina de Malchusa, by the law of the land. But in any event, so what we're talking about here are the two ones that are practical are if you buy real estate or if you buy notes, if you buy paper, meaning like let's say promissory notes, right? And you want to purchase a promissory note, and the guy, you feel that you overpaid for the promissory note because fair market value of a note that let's say is worth $100 is only worth $80, and the guy charges you $95, whatever it is, that you don't have a right to say I was overcharged. And the reason is because these things were, it's clear that these were excluded, as the Gemara derives from the Psukim. Shaharei hakarkos ein lahem din ona'ah, shenemar okano miyad amitecha, davar hanikna miyad liyad. And the real estate is the exemplar that the Gemara uses to exclude, because when the Torah says, the Torah details the law of ona'ah, it says, anything that you buy from the hand of your friend, miyad amitecha, from the hand of your friend. So it's clearly referring to chattel, movable items that can be transferred physically from the buyer to the seller, from the seller to the buyer. So therefore, real estate is excluded. Real estate can't be picked up and transferred. V'lamdu chachamenu zalmi pasuk zeh sheyatzu karkaos she'enan metaltalin. So real estate is excluded. And then the Gemara connects slaves, contracts, and hektish to real estate using scripture. Okay, let's go on to the next.
For real estate, if there's misrepresentation, like there's you sell land, and actually it was actually swampland and the water.
So misrepresentation is completely different. Up until now, we haven't talked about misrepresentation. You know, we're talking about where there's been no misrepresentation other than them charging you more than it's worth. But if I tell you that it's prime real estate and it's not, and I show you a brochure of sprawling hills, and then when you get there, it's the place is a dump and it's swampland, that's misrepresentation. That's prohibited for Jews and non-Jews. That's fraud. Yeah.
So Rabbi, there's a practice that a lot of real estate agents have where they put up a house for sale at a very low price, thinking that it's gonna be bidded upon and push the price up higher. Is that also sort of a misrepresentation of the price?
Not at all. Not at all.
Why would you think that? Why would you think this as representation?
Because it's deceiving, because they don't really want to sell it at that price.
Yeah, but once you commit to sell it at that price, you just want to do it to start a bidding war. It's a strategy. It's a business strategy. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Okay. Mi sheyada kishalakach hachefetz miyad hamocher v'shosa kedei litvoach harkach ha'ona ein shtikato nechshevet kemechila v'yachol litvoa toch zman kedei sheyara letagar v'chulei. He says there's one opinion that states that even if at the time that you're buying it, you suspect that you're being ripped off and you don't say anything, then you do have the right to later lodge a complaint and demand a refund, because you could say, well, I needed time to verify it, to show it to an expert. Okay, that's the language. Kedei sheyara letagar. How much time do you have to lodge?
30 days.
It all depends on the industry, because it's not an automatic 30 days. If, let's say, there's an expert appraiser that lives in I could easily take this to the Promenade Mall and see whether it's gold or not, or see how much it's worth. And I could do it within 24 hours. So then my time frame is 24 hours. It's as whatever time is necessary, that is reasonable to show it to an expert. That's how much time you have to lodge a complaint that you were ripped off. Okay. But so therefore, even if you knew that you were being ripped off, but you needed to verify how much you were being ripped off by taking it to an expert, you could later on come back and say, I knew you were ripping me off, I just didn't know how much it was. And now that I verified it, I'm taking you to Beis Din so that I can get a refund. Ulam yesh cholkim v'sovrim sheshtikaso havi kahoda, amnam hapaskim naktu lahalacha kidakaso v'ramasham shein zenechshav l'mechila. There are some poskim who disagree, who say that if at the time when you bought it, you knew you were being ripped off, and you had every intention of nullifying the sale or demanding a refund, you don't have and you bought it anyway, you don't have a right to go back and argue. However, it seems the consensus is that you could always say, I knew I was being ripped off. I knew that I was going to demand a refund. I just needed time to show it to, he had me over a barrel, whatever it was. I needed the item right then and there. So I bought it from him, but I knew that as long as I could show it to somebody, I could take him to Beis Din. Okay. Isser hona'a keshemiskavein lahashiv ha'ona. Asr lahonos es chaver af yesh lo kavana lahachzir achar kach es ha'ona. He says it's prohibited to overcharge, rip someone off, even if your intention is to afterwards refund his money. Okay, Kol shezeh yoser mishtus. Bless you. So it's still going to be usher to do that, even if your intention is to refund them afterwards.
Why was it? We can rip them off with the intention of giving back, just.
Maybe you-
Mistake.
No, maybe you need the money. Maybe like, you need cash, you're hard pressed for cash. And so you figured there's a sucker's born every minute. And before Yom Kippur, I'll give him back, when I have to do tshuva.
The best time to rip off people is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is what you're saying.
No, right after Yom Kippur.
Right after Yom Kippur, yeah. V'nira shekol shepachos mishtus al menas lahachzir mutar. If, however, you rip him off less than a sixth with the intention of returning it, he says it seems that would be mutar. I don't agree with that at all. I think that's a mistake. He quotes the Nesivos Mishpat, who implies this from Tosfos.
This is where ChatGPT gets its misinformation.
Yeah. Okay, finally. Kol shaha'ona hi pachos mishtus yesh kan mechila ve'ena yachol lahachzir hachefetz v'hamekach kayim. If the amount of overcharge is less than a sixth, so then there's no legal recourse, and we consider it as if the buyer has been moichel on the overcharge. V'hama'ana yesh lo lahachzir ha'ona, but still it is proper for the seller to return whatever he overcharged. Va'af im nisyaker ohuz al machzir ha'ona k'fi sha'isa bizman ha'mekach. And that would be true even if by the time the overcharge was discovered, the item has accrued in value. Meaning that the seller could say, listen, it's true that when I sold you the item last month, I overcharged you, but now it's worth that amount. So let's, Shalom al Yisrael. No, so the answer is no, that it's only proper if the guy wants to do the right thing, then he should give back the money that he overcharged. Okay. So, in other words, the only difference between a sixth and less than a sixth is that a sixth is actionable in Beis Din, and less than a sixth is not actionable in Beis Din.
When you're talking about something you buy, that's $10. A sixth is nothing, but you're buying a house. That could be a huge amount of money.
Well, we said that real estate,
Still,
real estate is not subject to but a car, let's say,
still.
right? But
car sales,
So usually the problem with used car salesmen is misrepresentation, where they paint over the rust, or something like that.
But a car would have a market value, like there's
a blue book
price at every dealer.
Like you're talking the
You
quality
see some
of
sucker come in and you overcharge them.
there's cases in Toronto here where car dealerships bring back the odometer.
Mhm.
This is going back about 25 years. They got caught. And they got heavily
You can do
fined.
that.
Not anymore, but you used to be able to when there was all manual.
I see.
They would turn it, 20,000 kilometers back.
There could be a way to do it if you can hack into the what's it called, the
That's a huge difference in pricing. If I have 60,000 clicks or 100,000, it's a big difference in money.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a criminal offense to play with the odometer.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
Remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Sure.
Yeah.
They tried
Oh,
to
the father's car.
they tried to turn back the odometer by putting it in reverse, and then the car
off the cliff.
and then the car went off the cliff. Yeah. Okay. Sheilot utshuvot biktsara. So some quick questions and answers about the laws of Ona. Din katan be'ona. What about a minor? Sheila, Bamesha Tiknu Chazal, Likatan Shia Mekcho Mekach. We know that the rabbis say that a minor's, a child under bar mitzvah, technically he doesn't have enough das to be able to consummate a sale. But the rabbi said, in order to avoid children being exploited, we will make their sales and purchases valid sales. Okay, ha'im kishenasa v'nasan hakatan b'metaltalin dino le'inyan ona'a kedin gadol depachos mishtos yesh din mechila b'katan o b'pachos mishtos haman etzarech lahachsu l'katan es ha'ona'a shaharei b'katan ein bo din mechila v'en yachalim chalalano aso. So the question is, what if I overcharge a minor? And furthermore, it's less than a sixth. Now, we said when you overcharge someone less than a sixth, we assume that the buyer is going to be moichel, even when he discovers that he was overcharged. It was less than 16%, so he's going to be moichel. What can you say that also for a minor? A minor doesn't have the ability, he doesn't have the das to be moichel. He doesn't really have a developed intellect to know that he should be moichel. So is there an argument to be made that even when you overcharge less than a sixth, you would have to give him a full refund or nullify the sale or anything like that? So the answer is, you know what, we'll get to the answer tomorrow. We'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Beautiful.